Hello and welcome to Chess Please. My name is Andy and today we're going to learn how to checkmate with just a rook. Let's jump on in. Okay, so yes, we're going to cover off how to checkmate with just a rook, or to be very pedantic with it, a rook and a king against your opponent's king. Now this might seem really simple, and after you do it a few times it can be, but if you're under time pressure or if you just never learned, it's a little bit tricky to get checkmate with just your king and your rook, but it is possible. So today we're going to cover off three factors. We're going to cover off your guiding principle, essentially what you're trying to do. The mechanics of how you do that is step number 2, and then finally how do we apply the checkmate or the finishing touch, which can be a little bit tricky. So in terms of guiding principles, at each stage our goal is to reduce the amount of living space that the black king has here. So for example, with our rook, this black king is cut off at these points here. As long as this rook is defended, the king will never get to venture into these planes. And what we want to do to deliver a checkmate with just a rook and a king is to slowly reduce down this box. And as you say, if we move our rook up here, then he can no longer go here. If we move our rook here, then they can no longer go here as well. Ultimately just driving them into the corner, or at the very least the side of the board. That is our guiding principle, and you can do so with the king and the rook, just slowly chipping away. And if you're anything like me, when you're trying to trap a king, they're very wriggly. So what I mean by that is, for example, if we try to do, say for example, the king moves here, and we want to cut off, well, another file here, or another rank that they can't access. And then you would do this, and then the king goes here, and we're kind of back to square one. They've kind of danced around our little fenced-in area, and they are going to get to access these planes. In this case, it's not so bad because they have these three. They're still pretty hemmed in here, but if you do that enough times, like if you keep letting them wriggle out, you're going to run out of time, or you'll end up repeating a position and you'll end up drawing the position. So alongside cutting off some of these avenues and files, you also want to use what is known as opposition. So opposition is a term used when two kings face each other like this. And what it means is it's basically quite advantageous to put your opponent's king in opposition, i.e. move your king into a position where the kings are faced off like this, one square in between. The reason being is because these three squares are not accessible for any king. And if you're the one that's moved into opposition, then on your opponent's next move, which is now, they can't move into those squares. So by combining the technique of cutting off the king as well as opposition with your own king, you can slowly drive the king back. In this example, for instance, they can no longer access this square to kind of shimmy away from our rook's advances, so they'll have to go to one of these three squares, which is great. That feeds into our strategy of trying to cut off some more ranks and files as they go through. So they do the same here, and again we can just do it nice and gradually, chipping away. They'll probably do something like this, and if they do make a move like that, you can find yourself again in danger of just moving here and letting them wriggle away like this again. So this brings me on to the third technique. So the first technique, cutting them off with the rook, lowering the living space as much as possible. The second technique, using opposition with your king, so that they have a limited number of options of where they can move. The third technique is taking advantage of what is called Zugzwang. Zugzwang, a German word. In this case, in every case, it basically means that by moving, you will worsen your position, i.e. by having to move because it's your turn, you're going to leave the best square for your king, or any other piece really, but in this case a king, and we want to utilize that fact. So here the king is in the best square it could be. It's like, causing a threat for this rook, and we're not able to make any progress in terms of cutting it off without it being able to wriggle away or just take the rook. So what we do is we make a very calm waiting move, and we just move our king here. We keep it in defense of the rook. We know that the king again can't go here because of the rook. It has to move because it's black's turn. Again, if we look at the king here, once more it will have to move into one of these less opportune squares. And if we move, say for example here, Again, we can use the topic of opposition, because in this particular case we actually can't cut the king off just yet, because if we go here he takes, if we go here he wriggles away. So again, we'll use that opposition technique we just learned, move the king here, and once more we see we are driving the king back between a combination of moving our rook to cut off the files, moving our king into opposition, and also making some waiting moves with our king when needs be. So we go something like this here again. This calls for a waiting move, king steps back, and we get to cut off the king piece by piece. So I'm just going to continue on in that fashion very quickly, just to get us into the checkmating position. So again, we'll just make a nice little waiting move here. We'll put our king in opposition. Again, they must retreat. We'll put our king even opposition once again, retreat once again, and slowly just making them back up a little. This one's going to be a waiting move. Our king is now in opposition. We'll make a waiting move. Again, they've got to back up. We put them in opposition. They've got to back up again. We're just going to keep pushing them, keep bullying them into the corner. We're in opposition, so we're going to make a waiting move. They'll do this. Put them in opposition again. They've only got one square to go. And now we have them where we want them. They're on the side of the board. And we can kind of keep going in a pretty similar fashion. What they're going to try to do is try to get, like, again, wriggle away. They're very, very wriggly, these kings. So what you want to do is just, same principles apply. Make your waiting moves. Put them in opposition when you can. Force them into the corner, like so. Again, they've only got a couple of moves left. We can start to do this. And then they'll do something like this. Pop them into opposition. And here. And now is when we can really start to drop the hammer. And once you get to this position where the king, your king, is 2 out from the corner, your rook is on the 7th rank or -1 rank from the side, and your king, their king, excuse me, is caged in between those two, what you actually want to do, just get the rook out of there. Just get the rook out of there, because if the king tries to wriggle away now by going this way, what we learned earlier about kings in opposition is that these 3 squares are cut off for both kings. This king has no retreat squares either. So that's actually checkmate there. And if we take this back a little, if instead they go into the corner here, then you can move your king here. And again, king only has 1 move. And when you look at it again, it's opposition here. And that's checkmate there as well. So by driving the king to the corner, you start to cut off the possible squares, and you start to force them into a position of opposition like this. And when they are on the back rank in opposition, dropping a rook onto that back rank with them will be checkmate. So again, get the kings facing each other, or if not facing each other, this will also suffice. Something like that. Well, again, can't really move the pieces at will, but if the king was in the corner in this stage and our rook dropped back, it's also checkmate as well. Just a little quirk of the corner. Right, so that is just about enough of the theory. We're going to put these principles to the test by playing against the very best chess computer that chess.com have to offer. It is a 3,200 rated player, eye-wateringly good at chess, better than Magnus Carlsen, and a little bit better than me as well. But it doesn't matter how good they are. If we stick to our principles, cutting the king off, putting them in opposition when we can, making a waiting move when we can't, and slowly and gradually driving them to the corner of the board, even this computer is going to be no match for a rook and a king with just their king. So let's see how we get on. Let's see if the proof is in the pudding here. We'll cut the king off here. Cut them off again. As much as they'll let us, we'll cut them off. I don't want to lose my rook, so we will not do that. Okay, no cut-off move available here, so we'll just keep our king in the picture. There's a cut-off move, though. And another cut-off move. Ooh, we've overplayed our hand here, because you'll see here, and it's a mistake. But it's not a fatal error. I've left my king too far from my rook, so we'll just drop the rook back here. But still, the room has been cut off, and we'll keep our king in the picture. There's a chance for some opposition. There's a chance for some cutting off. There's a chance for some cutting off. And we'll just keep our king in the picture. Keep our king in the picture. And in this case, we could put him in opposition here, but we're kind of driving him to this corner. So let's just make a waiting move. And now we've time to cut him off. We'll make another waiting move. Put him in opposition. We'll cut him off. And now we're in very good shape. We are in very good shape. They are on this side of the board. Our rook is on side -1. We'll just keep driving him to that centre. And now, as we said, we'll just get the rook out of there. They're in the square next to the corner. Our king is 2 away from the corner. And we just do this. And now we see that lovely little opposition, and we've just checkmated the greatest chess mind on the planet, aside from some of the weirdo bots. But a 3,200 rated player, they're no match against it. And now they're no match against you. So remember, drive the king to the side of the board. Use opposition when you can't find room to cut them off with your rook. Cut them off when you can. And if you can do neither, just make a waiting move. Keep your rook defended. Keep the king in the picture. When you get them to the squares just beside the side of the board, get your rook out of there. And whenever their king is looking your king straight in the eye, drop your king back onto the back rank. And that'll be checkmate. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope it made sense. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Have a quick subscribe if you fancy it. We'll cover off more videos like this in the future. But that was something that I struggled with when I was learning chess, and still do the odd time, particularly under time pressure. So this method has helped me just make sure of it. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.